Okay, let's have a look. Hi everybody on Facebook. I'm just going to give it a minute just to make sure that I'm coming out live, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of information about what I was going to talk about, what I'm going to talk about. Just bear with me. My computer's being a little bit awkward. Okay. Alright, I think I'm coming out live, so I'm going to risk it and start talking about the title of this live, which is about relationships, highs and lows. So hopefully I'm coming out live. Just give me a thumbs up, just to let me know. Yeah, people are watching. Okay, cool. Alright, so firstly, thank you very much for those that have tuned in to watch. I thought I would do this live, a bit impromptu, a little bit inspired about some conversations I've been having with students and friends and etc. Which the occurring theme for those conversations, in fact I did a socially distanced one-to-one yesterday, or home visit with clients, and it was all whittled down to the same thing, and that is relationship. And I thought, and it's been something, as I say, for the last couple of weeks, I've had several things that have occurred where the word that keeps on popping up in the conversation to do with issues people have had with their dogs has been relationship. So I thought I would talk about relationships in dogs, dog training, dog ownership, and how it all hopefully can help, or certainly my insight can help you guys, okay? So as I said, the thing that keeps on recurring, there's been several people that have contacted me, reached out to me for advice, whether it be online or whatever medium, where they're struggling with their relationship with their dogs. So I thought I would speak on my own experiences with my own dogs, and also other aspects that there's parallels when it comes to relationships. So the thing that I would say, and I'm going to say it confidently, is I pride myself on having a really strong relationship with my dogs. I really feel that the relationship I have with my dogs is one that I feel is based on them having trust and confidence, and they're very into me. If I was walking them, my dogs would always gravitate to me versus somebody else. All that squishy stuff. But I would say, the other thing I would say in response to that, and I've owned a lot of dogs, is I didn't have that with all my dogs from the beginning, and that's something to be clear about, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So the misconception when we talk about relationships with our dogs is that a relationship is a given. So, for example, you get your puppy, you plan your puppy, or you spontaneously acquire this dog from whichever source, whether it be a breeder, a rescue, a rehome, and the assumption being is that the second you get it, that this dog is going to look into your eyes lovingly and longingly, and that's it. And that's not to say that doesn't happen. I've had dogs that the second I've got them, I've instantly had that connection with them. And largely, being truthful, it was very much one-sided initially because the puppy didn't know me. And with some dogs, they've naturally, definitely, they've connected with from the get-go. It's like they've always been in my life. I would say Hottie's definitely that type of puppy, where the second I got her, it's like she was, just literally walked in and was part of my being, etc. from the second I got her, or the second, largely, I made that decision to that was the puppy I was going to have. But other puppies and other dogs I've had, it's taken me time to create that relationship. And there is the thing to be clear on is there's two aspects if we're talking about relationships broadly that we need to consider, certainly for those of us that do dog sports. So we have our domestic home relationship, and the relationship in which is just the dog and us engaging on a day-to-day basis. That's one aspect of a relationship. The other aspect of a relationship is your working/training relationship. And the thing to be clear on is those are actually two very different entities. I've had dogs that I've had an amazing working relationship since the second I got them. So Thriller, Swagger, Jungle, Super, several dogs I've had. The second I've got them, I've gone, this dog and I have had a deep, a really connected working relationship. And it's primarily because those dogs that I've described had a natural affinity to do the behaviours that I was training, whether it be, certainly for dog sport, they had a natural tenacity for work, as it were. But in truth, with several of those dogs, certainly for Swagger, who was a German Shepherd dog that I had that unfortunately I lost very young, I had an instantaneous working relationship with her, but my actual domestic relationship took several months, if not probably closer to a year, to really, really connect with her, because she was such a nightmare to live with. And when I say nightmare, she wasn't sort of dangerous or had any problematic behaviour. She was just so full on and so high drive and all that comes with living with that ilk of dog. So there's other dogs that I've had an amazing connection with, and from a domestic point of view, that have been. Punch is a great example of that. A dog, my boxer. The second I got him, I called him Perfect Punch because he was literally perfect. He walked in my house. He's never ever been in his whole life, certainly when he was a puppy, a problem in the home whatsoever. He's been the model puppy. He never was dirty. He slept through the night. He was literally perfect as a puppy. But his working relationship has been somewhat, our working relationship has been challenging because of several things. One, he was injured, and his things that have come up with him as an individual dog that have challenged me as a trainer. His stamina levels from the work point of view has been very, very frustrating, and that has been our working relationship has taken time to evolve. And the thing to say about relationships is relationships need you to be invested in, and they are constantly going through peaks and troughs. And it was a very interesting discussion and I've got her permission to discuss this. So please don't take this as me speaking out of turn. But I'm going to parallel relationships with with Neve, my daughter, and Lois, her mum, and how we both have how our relationship with Neve has evolved and grown. So I just had as I was telling Neve and Lois I was going to do this live, I said, "Oh, do you mind if I discuss this?" And instantly the discussion of relationships is very, very emotive, and that's the thing to be considerate about when you're discussing them and you're thinking about them. Instantly relationships trigger something within us that almost is interconnected with being good or bad. So if you have a bad relationship, the instant implication or inference is that you are a bad dog owner, or you are, in this case, a bad parent. And if you have a good relationship, therefore you are a good owner, and etc. And as we well know, I'm sure most people understand that isn't necessarily the case. But certainly, when specifically on Neve, the initial relationship Neve and I had versus how Lois and Neve had was very, very different, and it was largely because Neve was very much, obviously wanted, and we, the level of expectation of her arrival, but it definitely for Lois created this deep sense of being overwhelmed and motherhood, and I think this is something that is very openly talked about, certainly with newborns and people being overwhelmed by everything that goes with it. Coupled with that, Neve was very challenging in terms of her eating. She had really issues with her finding the right formula or the right milk for her. There was the pressures of whether we fed formula or breastfed, etc. And it was very, very overwhelming for Lois initially. And their relationship now is absolutely amazing. Like, they have this really brilliant bond where it's like this little mini-me stuff. And that's not to say my relationship with Neve is fantastic, but we both have our own dynamic with her, and all credit to Lois. Lois has really worked at that and invested in that. And the discussions we were having was that it wasn't that. It's easy to understand when you're talking about relationships that if the person or the owner of the dog is negligent, they don't spend any time with them, they don't invest in the relationship, they don't put the work in, and the dog largely goes, well, I'm not really bothered because you're not putting the work in and I'm not putting the work. The dog isn't going to naturally gravitate to you. Same with kids. If you don't invest, the chances are they're not going to reciprocate. But when you are trying and you're almost over-trying, that's when sometimes it can actually be overwhelming. Or you feel overwhelmed by the process because you're doing all the right things and you're putting the work in and you're not getting any response back. The takeaway from that is relationships take time to evolve. And they don't just happen like that. Just because you've got the puppy and you've wanted it and you've planned it and you've got the right puppy for your sport and you've picked the right lines and you've picked the puppy that you want, etc. Just because you get that puppy home doesn't mean that that's it, you're going to hit the ground running. It doesn't work like that. It takes investment on your part to work and nurture the relationship. And the other thing is to consider is that, certainly for my relationship with Neve, is it isn't a given and you need to keep on working at it. So again, being very personal about the discussion of relationships, I would say initially me and Neve had a very, very instantaneous connection. I would say I'd credit a lot of that to owning lots of dogs and being very fully aware that you're going to lose sleep. They're probably going to, not be toilet trained, well, certainly it wasn't, and she's not going to clean them at night, and she's going to be demanding, etc., because I've had a lot of dogs, and I understood that was part and parcel of the process. But in fairness, as she's got older, there is part of me being truthful that was slipping into taking that a little bit for granted. And when I'm engaging with her, I would be, doing work, or I would try to be doing work, and I would be trying to play with her, and she would pick up on that, and she would, sometimes say to me, Dad, you're not listening to what I'm saying, or Dad, you're not paying attention to what I'm doing. And that for me was a bit of a pull-up in our relationship, that I wasn't taking for granted that because we do have a bond, and it was very, very quick, that I need to keep investing in that relationship with her. Because, like with all things, relationships aren't just that's it, you've got it, you can rest on your laurels. You need to invest in them, you need to work at them, and you need to take ownership for your part of the relationship, and not expect the dog, the baby, to just naturally bond with you. I think that's something in dog sports that it's very easy to, if the dog doesn't fit within all dog ownership, if it doesn't fit within a certain criteria or a certain mould, we put the onus of responsibility on the dog's shoulders to they don't meet whatever that we had at our level of expectations placed on that dog's shoulders. And it's very much about our responsibility to change the relationship between the dog. Common examples of relationship issue are, for example, if we foray into another breed of dog. That's a really classic one. So again, taking it back to my own experiences, when I got my first Malinois nearly 20 years ago, Strut, I was grossly, he was actually, I bonded with him, I had a great relationship to begin with, but a massive point of our, which was challenging, and I would say this has been a recurring theme with all my male dogs, is adolescence, when they become very problematic and they probably become more challenging because of testosterone, they develop behavioural issues. That for me and him was definitely a real testing point in our relationship. But I definitely felt overwhelmed by that experience with that dog particularly. And the reason I had that feeling of being overwhelmed is because I hadn't experienced that to that ferocity that I did with that particular dog and when he entered adolescence and how challenging he was. And I was an experienced dog owner. I thought, well, great, it's a dog. I've been through adolescence with previous dogs and male dogs. This will be fine. And I was grossly underprepared for certainly Strut and what he morphed into. Now, that's to say we persevered, we came through it, and it took a lot of work, but it definitely was a challenging time for our relationship. Again, as I talk about with my high drive dogs, sometimes they are so focused on the work, the domestic relationship takes time to evolve. The thing about relationships is, if you have one or t'other, use that as your starting block to get the other aspect going. So I've had dogs that I've absolutely, again I talk about Punch, from the second I got him, I absolutely adore him. He's just, he's my boy, I love him to bits, he's very super affectionate, he's always he's the most laid back dog in the house that you could possibly meet. He's a joy to live with, but his working relationship has taken time to nurture and to create. And it's been frustrating, but because I had a really good domestic home relationship or away from work, that really stood me through a lot of challenging times. In contrast, a dog like, for example, my German Shepherd Swagger, she was an amazing working dog, and I used that to piggyback my domestic relationship. That got me through the tougher times. Now, the question is, well, what if you don't have either? What if you don't have a working relationship, and what if you don't have a domestic relationship? Then it's really down to you to change the dynamic of both of those. And there's practical things that you can do and you can affect to improve your relationship. There is definitely things that you can do that are going to hinder your relationship. So I always look at people, and the most basic thing in the beginning of a relationship is your dog's recall, and that doesn't mean the dog doing a precise, recall for obedience. It means your dog's response to its name. That is the beacon of which everything else will be built. Two of my most influential mentors, Susan Garrett and Sylvia Bishop, both place so much emphasis on the dog's name, and they both essentially invest in the initial stages in their dog's name and their dog's response to their name. And I take that and that for me, both of those people have amazing relationships with consistently with various types of dogs, and it's because they build their relationship on that beginning part. The dog, what they look for is the dog to respond with enthusiasm and with joy when they call them, and they don't ever allow the dog to be in a position where the dog lacking response to their name can be rehearsed. So what that does is it places a lot of emphasis and value in their being. So the dog instantly, you're building a connection with the dog. So investing in your recalls in many, many ways is definitely one of the ways in which I would start to build a relationship. Now, I have a lot of dogs in for training, behavioural problems, rescue dogs, rehome dogs, foster dogs. Several of you may have followed the progress of Tizer, who I had for probably 9 months, I think it was in the end, before he was found the appropriate home. And generally speaking, when I bring dogs in, I build first and foremost our recall. So I create with them a working relationship. At that point, I don't have, and with some dogs, although I have a connection because they're a dog and I'm a dog lover, I don't have that deep, intense relationship that I would necessarily have with my own, because that, as I said, takes time. So I might have that dog for 2 weeks. But what I do is I first create that base relationship. I work on a domestic recall, I make sure that they respond to their name, and I create as much value as I can to the dog for my being. Given that the assumption that your dog is going to walk into your home and naturally connect with you is a little bit short-sighted, to be truthful. You need to work on it. You need to assume that your puppy's going to ignore you. Or your older dog, it doesn't really matter. You have to assume they're going to ignore you. You have to assume they're going to probably destroy your house. You'll have to assume they're probably going to like your dogs more than you. You have to assume they're not going to have a recall, so they're going to probably run off away from you. You have to assume that they're going to be probably a bit concerned and stressed and fearful in different environments. But the reason I say that is not to be negative, is that you are going in there with the mindset of being proactive. So proactively set the home up so your puppy can't chew your furniture, because even that can affect your relationship. If your puppy is chewing things in your home, the puppy's now going to be labelled, and that's one of the other issues of relationship. A very common issue is labelling. Your puppy is now labelled the naughty puppy or the problem child. So if you have that in the back of your mind, that's how now you are going to see that dog. If you see that dog as a problem child, every subsequent behaviour that dog will be, you will see the problem or the naughty or the misbehaved aspect of his personality, when in truth it was mismanagement on your part. Yeah, allowing your puppy to have enough freedom where it can rehearse inappropriate behaviour is mismanagement on your part, and it's a very simple thing to rectify. Change your environment, control your environment, limit where your puppy can move in your house. No different to, now obviously Neva's 3, she can move around the house, a lot more, with a lot more freedom and less restriction than when she was a toddler, because she didn't have the skills and the knowledge to be able to understand not to touch hot things, not to pull things from the side, not to reach up and grab things, not to put her hand in the inappropriate wall socket, etc., etc. So it wasn't that we expected her to come hardwired with those innate God-given gifts. We educated her, we managed her environment, so we didn't allow her ever to be in a space where she could not be safe. So that's a key thing. Another thing is to find something that you and that dog can connect with, whether it be play. It might be that your dog, you have a puppy that, for example, Juggling will always love to play and interact and tug a toy. So that was one of the things that, because she did it so brilliantly, I found something that she excelled at, that I could connect with her. Potty, for example, loves to learn. She loves to engage, and she loves to be doing, so that's our inroads to form our relationship. So I found a common denominator that we both enjoy doing together. So again, to parallel it back to dog sports and child rearing, one of the things that really, really has helped Lois and Neve have a really amazing bond, and sure some of you that follow me on Instagram and Facebook, is Lois is a very keen photographer, and her subject is normally Neve. And that was the thing that would be the thing, because I would be away working, and if there was days when they were together, Lois would take her camera out, go with Neve, and she would go off and take some brilliant photos. But Lois realised very quickly that when she went with an agenda of, I want to take a photo of Neve doing X, it would 9 times out of 10 go badly, because she would inadvertently get stressed about it, and it would be pressure on both of them to get this perfect shot. Whereas she just went with the flow and almost motivated Neve to, and made it much more of a game, their relationship and that particular activity totally and utterly changed. And you know, now it's the thing that they do together. I'm better off not being involved. It's their thing that they do together, and they go off and take, you know, they go looking for fairies, or they go looking for different things, and it's a huge part of their bonding experience. So think about that from your dog training. Find the thing that your puppy excels at. It could be tracking, it could be tugging games, it could be something that's fast and dynamic, it could be even food. Your puppy is a real chow hound. You know, sit with your puppy on your lap and give him a chew, so that you're building up that relationship. So think of things that your puppy does and mould them to what you want them to be, okay? So the other thing is accepting that relationships take time. They do not happen. I would actually openly say, I don't have that real intense, oh gosh, this is my dog, until my dogs have gone through adolescence, really. As much as I love them, and loving a dog is not the same as having a relationship with a dog. You can absolutely love them, but you don't necessarily have to like them, and that's a distinction. And there's no shame in saying, I've had dogs, for example, Scrunch, my first dog who started me in this journey, I absolutely loved her. I would openly say I probably didn't like her. And that isn't because I'm going to say I'm looking for, you know, people to say poor me or poor dog. It was a case of because I made fundamental errors with her. In terms of her rearing, I didn't work at her recall. She destroyed our house. She, you know, looking back now, it was all the things I've discussed with you. It was mismanagement. You know, we basically taught her to resource guard by not teaching her that being us exchanging food was a good thing. We basically taught her to destroy our house by not having a crate back in those days. This was 30 years ago. We didn't have a crate for her, so she had unsolicited freedom, so she was allowed to rehearse inappropriate behaviour. I didn't work at her recall, so she used to go out the front door and run off and not come back for several hours. There was all those problematic things which, really looking back, were the foundation for which our relationship were built. Now, I largely, because of my journey into dog training, improved and changed and largely solved the vast majority of those things. And the things that I felt I had missed the moment or I hadn't handled initially properly, I managed her behaviour. So she was always a resource guarder, and she would let me take food off her, but I was always aware that I wouldn't just be cavalier in taking things. I could very confidently take things off her, but I would always exchange it for something else, give her some treats, give her something else, so that there was always that unwritten rule. Whereas my dogs, now I could easily take something off them and it wouldn't ever be an issue, because it's been part of their upbringing. So, but I loved her, and you know, the day that she passed, you know, I was absolutely beside myself, as I would with any of my dogs, probably a lot more with her, because she had such an impact on my life. So we had definitely a relationship, but I definitely at times, I didn't love her, and she most definitely did not love me. So loving a dog doesn't necessarily give you the right that they're going to have that affinity with you. And so if you don't have that, and people place so much emphasis on loving the dog and the dog loving them, that they actually, it can be sometimes a source of pressure. So you can love a dog and you don't necessarily like them, and you can like the dog, or you might even have a brilliant working relationship, but you just don't feel that connection with them. And it's really about adjusting your mindset. So definitely not labelling them is a huge one. You know, if you label your dog as, again, I talk about one of my dogs, Springer, who I definitely struggled. He was a dog that suffered from second dog syndrome, and I owned his his